I think we're going to go ahead and kick off things here and get started. We've got a lot of great content for you here today. So thanks again for joining, everyone. Today you're here to listen about Microsoft Azure Certifications Explained. It's a deep dive for IT professionals in 2020. So, if you've attended an Altera webinar before, you probably recognize me. I'm Andy Syrewicze. And with me, I got a good buddy of mine that I've been wanting to get on a webinar here at Altera for a while. I've got Mike Bender. How's it going?
Not too bad. How you doing, Andy?
Hey, good. Hey, appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us today. I know you've always been involved in kind of the learning side of IT, so it's great to have you here talking about certification today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to sharing some knowledge about certification and getting people interested in the Azure certification tracks.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a good one. I know we got a lot of content, so I'll move us right along here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is kind of what the agenda for the day is. And we're going to be talking about some, basic introductions of myself, Mike, Altera, the sponsor of today's webinar. We'll also talk about some barriers to certification tracks, how to get certified, and then talk about some learning materials and certification tips and advice, mainly for, stressful test day, right? So we'll get into some of that type of stuff. And then we'll have wrap up and Q&A at the end. Now, one thing to know about the Q&A, feel free to use the questions form in GoToWebinar to, put in your questions as you think of them. But if there's something that we can address as we're going through the material, we'll try and stop and address the really quick ones. Otherwise, if you ask a question, we'll cover it in the Q&A section at the end. And then also note that if we don't get to your question today, because there's a large volume of them, which happens quite frequently, we always do kind of a follow-up blog post that it contains, a copy of the slide deck. It contains a recording of the webinar, and it also contains a full list of the Q&A with the associated answers. So if you don't get your question answered today, be on the lookout for a associated blog post after the fact with that information. So let's get to some introductions really quick. So I think my slide is up first. So again, my name is Andy Syrewicze. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency and also a VMware vExpert. Now, if you've attended a Altera webinar before, normally you know that I have been in the past a technical evangelist for Altera software. I've had a job change here in the recent past. I'm now an enterprise client advisor for Insight Business Solutions, which is a cloud service provider here in the U.S. Midwest. But thankfully, Altera still has me on for webinars, and I'm still happy to come show up and talk to you fine people and give you great content. So other than that, I've historically always been in the Windows Server stack and VMware with an emphasis on Hyper-V and vSphere technologies. And I've kind of focused on, like everybody else, focusing on cloud and containerization technologies and, all the new stuff that people are working on. So I've been focusing on that stuff for probably the last 5 years now. I should probably take the word new off of that bullet point. So anyway, I'll pass it over to you to do your introduction, Mike.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Michael Bender. I am a technologist, teacher of all things, and a community leader. Currently, I am an author evangelist at Pluralsight. So basically what that does is I build content on the Pluralsight platform. I also work with our authors and also our learners to just make better learning experiences. I used to be an MVP, but I'm an MVP no longer because I worked in Microsoft in Azure engineering for a bit. And before that, I worked at a technical college here in the Madison, Wisconsin area. So I've got about 20 years of experience in the IT pro space. Everything, I'm multi-certified across VMware and Microsoft and all of those different areas. And very much like Andy, like everybody else, I'm kind of into the whole automation, infrastructure as code, Azure, VMware, Windows Server, all of those things are kind of really my wheelhouse. So if you want to hit me up, you can at Michael Bender on Twitter. I also put a link to my courses on Pluralsight. And just a real shout out, you'll notice that there's a link down at the bottom. These are the resources for the webinar. So many of the links that we're going to cover during the webinar, I just simply put into a page on GitHub. So all the links from the deck will be in there, plus some additional links that we won't have time to cover. So a ton of resources for you as we go through this. So that's a little bit about the introductions, and I'll hand it back over to Andy to talk a little bit about Altera.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. So a real quick word about the sponsor of today's webinar, Altero Software. So Altero is a pretty awesome, fast-growing developer of super awesome, easy-to-use backup software. I used awesome a lot in that description there, but they are awesome. So that virtual backup solution is trusted by 50,000 plus customers, 10,000 plus partners, and 2,000 plus MSPs worldwide. That flagship product is Altero VM Backup. If you're interested in a little bit more information about that product, you can go to altero.com/VM-backup for more information. Or if you're an MSP and you're interested in the MSP offer, you can go to altero.com/MSP for more information on that. And with that, I think we're over to the certification content, and I'll let you take it away, Bender.
Awesome. Well, first when we talk about certification, one of the things that is a challenge for many people is there are some barriers and struggles to certification. And three of the main ones that come to mind are time, cost, and motivation. So time, we're all busy. We all have lives. We all have probably day jobs or maybe night jobs. Maybe we have families. We have other things that are going on. So figuring out a time that we can carve out to work on something like a certification can be difficult. The other challenge we have is the cost, is that it does cost money in order to take a certification exam. And oftentimes there's costs related to some of the learning materials. And maybe our employers don't pay for those. So that can be a challenge for us. The other is often motivation, is like, hey, I'm happy with my job. My employer isn't doing a lot of stuff in the cloud, so I don't have motivation there. Or maybe that, there's a little bit of fear in there as far as you haven't taken a test in a decade or something like that. And the act of going through that certification can be very stressful for some people. So what I'd kind of like to do is I'd kind of like you to think about flipping this around, is that all of these barriers, these obstacles are really the way for you to get where you want to be in your career. Because if you get certified, if you learn these things about the cloud, inevitably what those are going to help you be able to do in your career is grow your career. So hopefully, as your career grows, as you know more, you have more time and you have more money, and that will motivate you to keep going down the line. So these may look like barriers on one side, but I think on the other side, they're really goals for you to look at achieving. And we'll try to break down some of the things that will kind of help you along with your journey. So let's talk about understanding the Azure certification track. So the big thing with the Azure certifications, which is different from the Microsoft certifications, if you've taken those in the past, is job roles. And basically what Microsoft has done is they've taken a look at the common job roles. And these are 4 of the common job roles we have: administrator, developer, solutions architect, security engineer. And what they do is they do what's called a job task analysis. And they bring in a bunch of experts and go, hey, what are the tasks that are involved with being a solutions architect in Azure? And then they build the certifications around those. So what that leads to is that the certifications nowadays are role-based and not technology-based. So way back, you took a certification on Exchange. You took a certification on IIS. Now it's more role-based. So when you take an administrator exam in Azure, it's going to cover things across the board. You may have some infrastructure as a service stuff like compute, virtual machine storage, but then you might have some software as a service or platform as a service stuff in there. So you need to understand the breadth, because they're really looking at making the certification something that matches to a actual job that you'd go out and do, instead of just bringing a technology to the table, which I think is really a smart way for them to have moved the certifications into. Because for somebody new to the cloud, this is really a way for you to differentiate yourself and have some kind of proof that you actually know how to administer things in Azure. So if we take a look at the Azure certification path, we move from fundamentals all the way to expert. I apologize if if the slide's a little blurry here. In the fundamental areas, we have an AZ-900 exam, which is a fundamental level exam. It's an easier exam. It's designed for those people really entering into Azure. Here's one thing that I will mention about this exam. even if you are working with Azure, I would highly recommend you at least taking a look at the AZ900, the fundamentals exam. The reason is because it talks about a lot of things like the subscriptions, the resource groups, a lot of the things that people, when they jump into Azure, they don't think about how the costing impacts what's going on. And the fundamentals exams talks all about costing and all that sort of things. So it's a good fundamental foundational layer for you as you're going through. The associate exam, the AZ 103 or the 203 for developers or the 500 for the security engineer, that's going to be a associate level. You've been in the industry for 1 to 2 years. And then you move into an expert, which often involves either 1 or 2 exams. It takes you up to, oftentimes it's going to be like an architect level for the certification exams. So that's kind of the general path. And if you go to aka.ms/train-cert-poster, that'll give you all of the posters for the different certification paths. So if we take specifically look at the learning path for the Azure Administrator Associate, you see how they've built it around the skills required for the certification. Then they show you the exam. So we see the skills required are things like the Azure subscriptions and resources, how to work with those, storage solutions, VMs, virtual networks, identity management. That all rolls up into the AZ 103 exam, the Microsoft Azure Administrator. And by taking that exam, that makes you a Microsoft certified Azure Administrator Associate. So let's take a look. Actually, we'll jump over to the Microsoft website and we'll take a look at the role-based certification page. So when we go into the role-based certification page, you notice that it's got all of the different roles that are available. And we can simply just click in here to see all of the role-based certifications. And it gives us a nice little filter of all of the different job roles. So if you're a developer, you can go look for that. If you're in security, you can look for that as well. I'm going to go down to the job role for administrator. You see it brings up the 3 different administrator certificates. I want to explore the Azure Administrator Associate. And this is where you find out all of the information about the different certifications that you're looking at. So for this case, we take 1 exam and then it earns us the certification. You'll notice here, let me bring that in a little bit. You'll notice here that it has the skills measured. And those are the different objective domains of the exam, the pieces of information that you need to know for the exam. So to find out what's exactly in each one of these bullets, you go to download the certification skills outline. And this will bring you into the outline that's built out for this exam. And when you're studying for this exam, this is your blueprint for the exam. This is what you use in order to determine what you know and what you don't know and what you need to study as you go through this. So this is a super important piece of your study puzzle, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. And then you could simply just scroll down and see each of the different areas that are involved within the certification process. So we'll go back here, we'll go back into this, our certification area. And then you notice down at the bottom, it's going to have some different ways to prepare. It'll show you some free online stuff available in Microsoft Learn. We'll talk about that in a little bit. If you want to do some paid instructor-led stuff, they'll give you some information about courses for there. And then, of course, we see that the certification exam for the AZ 103, it's $165 US. You can have that proctored at an exam location. You can also take those online as well. So if you want to schedule that, you can go through that process. Then they also put in some different certification resources as well. So oftentimes, if you'll notice, there's this thing called exam replay. What this is this gives you an opportunity to actually buy a package that goes with your certification exam that gives you a second chance. So instead of just having 1 shot at the certification, you actually have 2. So some people like to have that as an option for them when they're going in. So that's a little bit about finding out the information about the certification. So let's go back to our slides. And let's talk a little bit about some changes that have come along. So AZ 103 is actually going away in May. And what that means for us as test takers is that we will have a new exam called AZ 104. And if you're already on the path to studying for AZ 103, go ahead and take it because it's still going to be around for 90 days. It's still going to be valid for the 2 years that the certification is valid until you need to get it certified. So if you've already started down the path, keep going, take AZ 103. It's still going to be a valid certification for you. If you haven't started out, you may want to look at waiting a little bit for AZ 104 to come out in the March timeframe. And so you see, we have a number of the certifications that have moved over. The developer exam, the solutions architect, the Azure AI engineer, all have changed over. And given you a link here to some more information about that. Don't get too worked up or worried about this. What I can tell you from the AZ 103 to 104 change, they've actually taken some things out of the exams to make it a little, I won't say it's easy, but they've taken some things out that really don't fit into it and have kind of reduced the volume of information that's in there. So if you've already been studying a little bit for it, it may very well fit into you that you could go right to AZ 104 from AZ 103 because it does cover the bulk of what's in there. So that's a little bit about the spring updates. So let's talk about getting certified. So when I look at the path to success for getting certified, first you want to choose your path. So depending on where you want to start, maybe you want to start at AZ 900, the fundamentals. Maybe you want to start at AZ 103. Maybe you're a developer and you want to go through the 203 exam. You need to choose that path. You need to acquire some knowledge. You need to know how you learn. Maybe you're going to do video learning. Maybe you want to read some books. Maybe you want to read some documentation online. Figure out what you need and get to it. Get some hands-on experience. All of the Azure certification exams require you to have hands-on knowledge of Azure. You need to be able to work with it. It doesn't make any sense to just know the theoretical stuff. You actually have to be able to work with it hands-on. So you need to get that hands-on experience. And then finally, get to the point where you want to prove your skills. And that's where the certification exam comes in the proving your skills part of it. So if we take a look at the cost of the certifications, the fundamental exam is $95. The associate and expert exams, I believe, are $165. You want to make sure to check the official posting for the current pricing in your area because it might be different if you're not US based and in your currency. So we talked about assessing and we talked about the different objectives. So when you're assessing your skills, you want to determine where you need to focus, and that's the important thing. You want to build up your weaknesses. So the areas that you're not familiar with, you want to grow those, and you want to lean on your strengths. So if you have limited time, use your strengths. Don't pour a ton of time into your strengths, the things that you know. Focus on building up those areas that you're weak in. And the big thing to remember, you cannot know everything. So just focus on the things that are in the blueprint. So what I want to show here is I want to show, and there's a link here, I want to show this great resource that was created by some MVPs over at build59s.com. And what it is it's an Excel spreadsheet that has, for the AZ 103 exam, all of the objective domains and all of the skill objectives that are in there. And what you can basically do in here is you can go in here and go, okay, for configure diagnostic settings on resources, I know well, I know little, or I have no idea. What this allows you to do is it allows you to mark through each of these areas, make a decision of how well you know this, and then you simply use that as a blueprint to determine where you're going to focus when you get into the point of actually going through studying the material. So this is a great way for you to be able to see where you're at when you start, and then you can also use it as an assessment. So maybe you take it once before you start to give you a blueprint of where you're going. then maybe halfway through you retake this to see how it compares to when you first started. And then when you're getting to the point where you're ready to take this certification, maybe you do it once more to give you those baselines to see, okay, how far have I progressed as I've gone through this? So this is a really great tool for you to use as you're going through that assessment and going through the process of acquiring those skills that you need. So let's talk about the learning materials. So there's a ton of different learning materials, and it's really important that you really understand what your style is. I'm an old school type learner, and this might sound kind of funny. I build online content for a living. I prefer to read books and read documentation and do hands-on stuff. That's just how I'm wired as a learner. Doesn't mean I don't watch videos. It just means I can't do all my training based on just online content. Some people might be a little bit different. Some people might prefer the online. There are people that prefer classroom training as well. And probably most of us, we also like to have that hands-on experience. So as you're going in, figure out which of those styles work for you and start pulling some resources in to work with those. One of the things that I do want to point out here about books, I've written books, I've worked on books, I've written content. One of the things as a content developer we always say is that as soon as it gets printed, it's already out of date. If you're going to take the AZ 104 exam, there will not be a book on the market when you go to take the exam if you're looking to take it in March or April. It's just not going to happen. And chances are once it hits the market, it's going to be out of date in a little bit. So the books are a good way to get some other information, but the real place you really want to go for documentation is docs.microsoft.com, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And that brings us to docs.microsoft.com. So let's take a look over at Docs, because it's really the place that you want to use as you're going through and learning learning about Azure or whatever it is. So if we go out to docs.microsoft.com/Azure, it brings us right into the Azure dashboard, or basically the start page with everything related to Azure. And if you've never been out to Docs, this is really the home for all of Microsoft's documentation. So if you're trying to learn Azure, you take that blueprint, you take all of those skills, and you simply start searching for that stuff inside of Docs and then use those options. So I have a search over here. Notice I put in deploy and manage virtual machines, and notice it's come up with a bunch of articles and also tutorials for doing that. That's what you should do for each one of those objectives in the blueprint, is simply go through and search through these. And then you go into these tutorials, and these are quick 5-minute, or the tutorials are a little bit longer. They'll take you through a scenario and they'll show you how to work through all of these. So in this case, notice there's a little try it here. What this will do, I think I forgot to do an Azure account here. So let's see if, oh, that's not going to work. Sorry about that. So if I were to sign in, what that would do, maybe it'll allow me to go in here.
Auto-filled your password for you, so you don't run the risk of fat fingering it like I always do in demos.
Yes, yes. So actually, I don't think that's going to work because I'm using profiles. Maybe it will. So get my authenticator here, and of course my phone is in the other room, so hopefully it comes to my watch. If not, we'll just go forward here. So basically, what the sandbox does here is the sandbox is going to, yeah, I don't think this is gonna work out. Sorry about that. So what the sandbox would do is it basically would create a sandbox for you to be able to build out those virtual machines. So it would open an Azure Cloud Shell, and then you would be able to go in there and be able to put the commands in that we saw there when we created those. So if we take a look at one of these, it would allow you to put in some of the commands. And that's a really cool way to be able to work with that, and a way to be able to work with that for free. So Docs is really the place that you really want to use as one of your main resources for studying as you're going through the process there. So let's jump back over to our slides and hands-on skills. So another great place to get hands-on skills is at Docs is a place called Microsoft Learn. And so if we go back out to our web browser, and that's the wrong one. If we go out to, I went to a specific resource that was listed out for the AZ-103 exam. It's a Microsoft Learn learning path called Administer Infrastructure Resources in Azure. And these are learning paths that Microsoft has put together with free learning that walk you through different areas of knowledge. So there's like create a Linux virtual machine in Azure, create a Windows virtual machine, work with VMs in the CLI, a bunch of different things. And these also have exercises as well. Notice here that I've got sign in to activate a sandbox. So what this will do with a Microsoft account, this will allow you to sign into a sandbox that will allow you to walk through all of the activities that they have in here. So it'll create a free subscription in the background. I believe it runs for about 4 hours, that allows you to do all of the hands-on. And you'll notice here, it's not just CLI. It actually allows you to go into the UI and be able to work within the Azure portal. So this is a great resource for those of you that are trying to figure out a way to be able to get certified and to get the hands-on skills without spending money in the cloud. Microsoft Learn is a great way for you to be able to get access to that through the different learnings that they have. And if you go out to, if you go all the way back out to Microsoft Learn, you see that they've got hundreds of different learning paths and modules that are available. And you can simply explore that and search that, looking for the different ones that you want to work with. So that's a really great resource for you to check out. So next, we have out at pluralsight.com, we have free Azure training that's available for you. So we have over 130 free video courses in our catalog, covers 8 of the certification learning paths. So let's just jump out there so you can check this out to see what this looks like. So if I go out to the pluralsight.com, it will give you a sign up and register. So this is absolutely completely free. So you don't have to have a Pluralsight subscription for this. This is a partnership between Microsoft and Pluralsight that they've created this content for their customers and learners to be able to learn on these platforms. So you'd simply go in here, you would register, then it would allow you to be able to go in and use our Role IQ Skill IQ. And this basically what it does is you go into each of the different objective domains, you answer a set of questions, and then it will rate you on a scale of novice to expert. And then it'll give you a curated list of all of the courses that fit into the path that you're looking at. So this is another great free learning tool for you to access. So if you are that video learner, you like to watch videos, you have a number of industry experts like Tim Warner and Mike Teskey, a bunch of other people that have created this content for you and is ready for you to go out there and learn. So let's go back to our slides here. And then the next is a free Microsoft Azure account. So one of the things that you'll need, you'll have these free resources. You'll always have to have some sort of account, and you'll need to do some work within the Azure portal. So if your employer doesn't allow you to play around in their tenant, you probably want to go out and get a free Microsoft account. So that's 30 days and $200 of credit. So that's really important for you to think about. Let's say you're going to be taking 2 months to study for a certification exam. Do you want to create your free Microsoft account the first day? Probably not, because you're going to run out of credit and days halfway through. So what you might want to do if you're planning on doing 2 months is use the first month where you go through Docs, you go through Microsoft Learn, you use some free resources out there, and then you sign up for the free Azure account and then use those resources for the last month of your usage. You want to make sure to use those wisely because they can run out pretty quickly. One of the options when you're creating virtual machines within the Azure portal is that you can create them using a developer level or dev lab resources. And what these are lower cost resources. They have also auto shutdown and auto stop. So your virtual machines will actually stop instead of keep running. So that's a really good tip for you is as you're learning to cut down on costs, make sure to shut down your resources or delete the resources if you're done. So I can tell you I was building a course on Azure Databricks last fall, and I left some stuff up and running. I came back on Monday and found that I had close to $400 or $500 in charges because of the stuff that I had left running. So it can get pretty pricey if you're on your own dime in the Azure account. So make sure to shut down those resources. What I like to do is a couple things. One, I like to do one at a time. So if I'm going to build some virtual machines and I'm working on that, I build them, I get the skills, and then I delete them. And then I move on to something else. Say I'm working with storage accounts, I go through my storage account exercises, and then I get rid of those. Get rid of the resources after you're done. The other good way to make sure that's easy to do is group all of your resources together. So if I'm working on a set of labs that's based around a set of resources, I will put those into a resource group. So when I'm done with all those labs, I can simply delete the entire resource group and it gets rid of all of the resources underneath it. It's an easy, clean way for you to be able to get rid of those. So if we take a look out here, out at azure.microsoft.com/free, shows you how to get access to that. There's also a number of free services. There's 25 plus free services that are available for you to use all the time for free. So some of the things you're learning may fall into those. Some of them may not. So great way to work with this. Again, use those wisely and you should be good to go. But I will tell you, as you're going through the process for learning and going through your certification, you probably will end up having to purchase some resources on your own. And that is simply that is simply kind of price of admission with the certification platform, is that you are probably going to have to invest some money into what you're doing. And I think that's fair. Is that one of the things that somebody that I looked up to, Don Jones, talks about all the time, is that we should be investing in our careers and not our jobs. And we can't always expect that our employers are going to pay for our certifications and pay for us to be skilled up. That, if we want a good career, if we want to move forward in a career in IT that involves the cloud, we're probably going to need to do some investment on our own. So keep that in mind as you're going through. So there are a number of other training methods that we talk about. We talk about the training books, classroom training, the hands-on experiences. A big way of learning the stuff is really teaching what you know. I know a number of people that there's one gentleman, he's a newly minted MVP. Part of his process was he just went through and basically started blogging about all of the different stuff that he was learning as he was going through the certification process. And it's also a great way at your work, maybe do a lunch and learn, or teach somebody that you work with, or write a blog post about the things that you're going through, because that's going to help you share your knowledge, and it's also going to build on that knowledge. You can also check out the different dojos that they have out at altero.com. and then all of the different resources and forums that are available there. So let's talk quick about some certification tips. So again, remember, I put all of the resources out there at GitHub. So if we take a look at some of those, you'll notice I've put a number of the certification information, some different training resources, different hands-on resources. And down at the bottom, I think is really kind of the area that if you're looking to really get started with certification, I would highly recommend reading the top 3 blogs. So Josh Duffney has done an awesome study guide for the AZ-103. So even if you're not looking at the AZ-103, check out Josh's blog because it's got a lot of great information about how to study for an exam, so you can leverage a lot of that for that. Then of course there's, Thomas Maurer. I used to work with Thomas. The amount of writing that he puts out is just amazing. So I just simply put a link to his certification category because he has so many blogs out there, it's hard to choose from. But he goes into in-depth how to study for an exam, which certification to pick, a lot of great information. So as a cloud advocate at Microsoft, he's got a great insight and great information. And another one of his teammates, Sonia Cupp, she wrote an amazing article on how she went through and studied for the AZ-900 exam. Again, it's focused on the AZ-900 exam. However, it really touches on here's how to go through and study for a certification and get the knowledge necessary for those. So a lot of great resources for you. And chances are I may add some additional resources as I go along. So you might want to check in with that from time to time. So let's talk about some tips for Azure exams as you're going through and the certifications. So the big thing with the Azure exams, because they are role-based, you need to understand how the products work together. So you need to understand not just how to build a virtual machine, but how virtual machines work with virtual networks and work with storage and how they come together in a scenario. Because many of the exam questions are going to involve a scenario. They'll give you a long scenario and then you'll have 5 or 6 questions that will test your knowledge of being able to put that information together. You also need to know how to do all of the things in the UI, PowerShell, and Azure CLI. So that's why it's really great to use docs.microsoft.com because it has all of those for you. It shows you how to do a VM in the UI and PowerShell and Azure CLI. Because many of the exams do have a hands-on component, so you need to go through those. Back when I used to take a ton of certification exams, and when I was first taking my VMware VCP exams, one of the things I always strived for is that I could visualize how I did the things in the graphical interface. And so when I get to the exam, when a question came up, even though there wasn't a hands-on for the VCP at the time, I could visualize in my head how that process all works. So you may or may not be able to get to that level, but that was a trick for me that worked. Being able to visualize how to do the different things made it easier. The next option is to use a practice test. So exam prep is the official, or I think exam prep or measure up is the official exam for that Microsoft uses. So that's a good one to use. There's another one called WizLabs. I'll throw the link out into the GitHub site that I haven't used it, but I know Josh has used it and some other people, and they've had really good success for it. Those really give you some practice doing the test taking, because from a lot of people I talk to, that's a lot of their biggest challenge is taking the test. They might know the information cold, but it's when they get into the exam that it's really difficult for them, whether it's test anxiety or whatever it is. But a practice exam will help you to get a better understanding of how the testing works and to be comfortable in like a timed scenario. Do work with a product, don't use a brain dump. The reason is, one, if you're using a brain dump, you're really not testing your knowledge and inevitably you'll get found out. And two, a lot of them don't have current information. Microsoft is always changing the pools that are involved with certification tests. So there's a good chance that if you are using a brain dump, that the questions that are in there may not be correct. So let's talk and kind of finish up with a little bit with my strategy for taking a cert exam. So what I do when I get into the exam, when the question comes up, is I read the question twice without making a judgment of what the answer is. I may have an idea, but I try to just focus on what is the question asking me. Then I read all of the answers, not just one and choose it. The reason is I want to work to eliminate the answers that don't fit the question information. This is really important and something that all test takers need to know. The exams are built with distractors that will work in a different scenario. I've worked on building certification exams for different Microsoft exams. And part of that process, we will have multiple questions in the pool that have the same answers, but you change the question to fit the different answers. So if you automatically just kind of, go over the question once and then you see an answer what you think is right, that may or may not be the right answer because your brain kind of does the work for you. So you want to take a more methodical method to it. Try to eliminate those answers that don't fit the question, because the question will often have things that don't matter in it that you can simply get rid of those and then get rid of the answers. Because I like to get to like 50% of like 2 answers to choose from. And then if I don't have a solid answer, I pick one and I come back. The reason for that is this, is that, oh, I just realized I didn't click those out for you. So the reason I do that is if you spend a ton of time on a question trying to figure it out and you run out of time, there's a good chance that you now have missed out on questions that you could have answered. So the goal is to answer every single question in the exam. And so if you don't have a solid answer, I usually limited each question to about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the length of it. And then if I didn't really 100% know it, I would mark that. I would pick the answer that I think it is. I would mark it for review. And then at the end, I'd leave myself time to review all of those questions at the end before I submit. So then I really feel comfortable with what I'm putting in is going to be good for hopefully passing the exam. So I shoot for answering every single question in there. So that's a little bit on exam strategy, a little bit on, that really covers the Microsoft certification. I know there was a lot of information here. A lot of it you're going to just need to digest now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a wrap up now. Andy's going to jump in, talk about a couple things, and then we're going to take some time for some Q&A.
Hey, sounds good. Thanks for the content there, Mike. That's a lot of great information, a lot of good practical stuff that people can apply as well. So good stuff. So yeah, like Mike said, we got just a couple of wrap-up related items here. Again, if you have questions, feel free to keep putting them into the questions form. We will certainly go ahead and address those here after we get through this wrap-up section here. So a couple of additional resources wanted to make you guys a bit aware of. So we do have forums out at Altero. So you can get to the Dojo forums by going to altero.com/, actually the URL is a little bit different there. It should be dojoforums.altero.com, I believe is the URL. So that will get you out to the forums, and there's a lot of great discussions happening there. Right now there are Hyper-V forums. They're labeled as Hyper-V forums, but we've got a lot of people doing Azure discussions there, automation discussions, Office 365 discussions, quite a bit of different stuff. So definitely be sure to check those out if you are interested. There are some VMware and more MSP focused forums coming eventually, but I don't have a timeline on that right now, but they are in the works. The next item we have in the wrap-up list here, I forget what the next slide is.
Oh.
No worries.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Oh,
Now, there we go. There's the URL, dojoforums@altera.com. So we must have had 2 Dojo Forum slides in there. So we'll go ahead and go to the next one. I think we've got an ebook to share with you as well. There we go. Maybe.
there we
There we go. Perfect. So yeah, I wanted to share one of our more recent ebooks with you all. So we've got a new ebook here on Azure IaaS. So basically it focuses, on all things Azure IaaS, kind of a sysadmin's guide to that topic. So this is going to be a bonus to all webinar attendees. You'll get this as part of signing up for this webinar. So I don't have a URL for you right now, but be sure to check your inboxes tomorrow, and that you'll get a link to this ebook in your email. And I also want to mention that this was written by Paul Schnackenberg. He's another Microsoft MVP, a good pal of mine. He writes great content and is really good at kind of giving, that big 10,000-foot view picture of the technology, but also give you, specific examples of where that technology applies and how to use it in your day-to-day. So definitely that's a great resource. I read through it myself, did kind of the technical review on it, and I'm definitely excited for you guys to get your hands on it and take a look at it. So with that, the next item is the poll. So kind of wanted to garner some feedback from attendees here. Wanted to go ahead and run a poll and see what certification track is most appealing to you. Now, Mike covered a lot of different certification tracks. We've got, the Administrator Associate, AZ 103, 203 for the Developer Associate, if we have any devs in the crowd today, the Solutions Architect, and I think one of the newer ones, the AI Engineer. So AI is a big up-and-coming area. Or maybe you haven't decided yet. Maybe you need some time to go back and digest some stuff and really decide what track you want to start going down. And hopefully, the stuff that Mike took you through has kind of helped you a little bit try to make that determination. So we'll go ahead and give folks a minute or two to fill that out, and then we'll display the results here shortly. So while they do that, Mike, I'll go ahead and we can start looking at some of the questions in the Q&A list here. A couple of housekeeping items first. We have some people asking about the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint will be supplied, so you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint, you'll get a copy of the slide deck, and in the chat, we also posted a link to the GitHub resources that Mike was talking about earlier. So that the URL for that is http bit.ly, so bit.ly/AZCert2020. Again, check the chat for that, and that will get you the information there. So I think the poll is closed, and that's pretty much what I expected. So we got 51% say Azure Administrator Associate is the one that they're looking at, with 33% saying Solutions Architect. So, I think, the vast majority of the people in the audience today are probably ops people. I did see 3% say Developer Associate, so it sounds like there's some devs out there, and 1% said AI Engineer. So we had at least one person say AI. So, and then 12% are undecided, and that's fine. You sometimes need to take a step back and kind of digest what you really want to work on, and that's fine. I've been in that spot many times throughout my career, and I'm sure Mike can attest to that as well, right? So anyway, I think we'll go ahead and do some Q&A now. So let's go ahead and advance the slide. And I want to mention one more time that if you haven't gotten your question in yet, go ahead and use that questions form in GoToWebinar, and we'll start going through the questions here. So one question that, not so much a question, but something that came to mind while you were talking about, spinning up resources in Azure, Mike, is making sure you turn VMs off and deprovision resources when you're not using them anymore, right? One thing that came to mind when you select VM sizes, I always try to recommend to people to look at the B series if you're actually testing outside of the dev labs, right? B series is that burstable VM size. They're priced pretty competitively, and you want to stay away from the M series, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah, those will be painful.
Yes. So those that aren't aware, the M series, I believe the official well, maybe it's an unofficial name over at Microsoft, is that's the Monster Series VMs, right? Um, so you want to stay away from the M series for testing, but yeah, definitely look at those B series VMs. Very cost competitive, and they're good for dev tests, definitely, and they're good for production workloads as well, as long as you're sizing them correctly and for the right job. So, um, so one question that I see keep coming up over and over again, Mike, is should we wait for AZ 104? And I think what you said was, if you've been prepping for 103 and you're comfortable and you're ready to go take it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're ready to go out of the gate, and I'm gonna switch over to something because I think this will be relevant to what we're talking about.
Sure.
If if you if you have already if you're already down the path, take 103. If you're just getting to the starting line, you might want to look at 104. That way you just, unless you're taking a certification in 2 weeks, say you're starting at the beginning of March and you're going to take it the middle of March and you're a super savant, then absolutely take 103. But if it's going to take you a couple months and you're looking at, like the May timeframe, chances April, May timeframe, you probably want to look at 104. And one thing I want to show out and I think this answers some of the other questions that are out there about the changes in the exam. If you actually go out to the AZ 103, you'll notice that I've got a PDF up here, that this is the AZ 103. And if we scroll down at the bottom, it actually has all of the comparisons between the exams, and it shows you what the changes are. So as we go down here, it highlights the things. So things that aren't in there. So Azure Functions, Logic Apps, and Event Grid are not on the exam anymore. Those have been moved. And then under virtual networks, you don't have to implement application security groups or DDoS. Traffic Manager, Front Door, Private Link aren't in there. And so it kind of gives you an idea of the things that aren't on here. So from a change standpoint, there's not a huge amount of change other than the things that just change in Azure as far as the UI and how you do things. But from the aspect of the things that are in the exam, it's really been reduced the amount of information that are in there. So like I mentioned during the webinar, take a look at the blueprint, the outline for each of the exams. And with those other exams that we pointed out there, the 203 exam, the architect exam, and the AI exam, those are the same way. Their outlines have been updated with what the comparison between the two exams.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that was a big concern for folks, especially if you've started going down that path. So it's nice to have these sheets here that outlines exactly what is and isn't changing. So definitely that's a great resource. One thing that I have seen in the chat, most of the stuff has been added to your GitHub page that you were talking about earlier, I think, right, Mike?
Yes.
The one that people are asking about is the Excel sheet with the certification, the blueprint points, and the drop down with that's included there as well, I think, right?
Yep. And let me show that page. There's actually, I think I have the link out to this page at Build 5.9's. If you go down, you notice that they have a number of different exams available out there. And I would guess that they're going to, once the exams are finalized, I would guess that they'll probably update these for the new exam numbers, the 104, the 204, and those sorts of things. So you'll notice here, I only showed the 103 one, but they do have a huge number of other assessment tools for a bunch of the other exams as well.
Definitely. Okay. Sounds good. I think we got time for a couple more questions here. Were there any that you saw on the list that you wanted to address specifically? I can just go pick them out too.
Yeah, I think we, kind of hit on the ones. Let's see. Yeah, why don't you pick out some ones that you think are good?
So kind of had an interesting one here, more of a comment slash question than just a pure question, but kind of an interesting observation. We have an attendee here say, you know, there's doesn't really seem to be any support for on-premises customers. It's unclear how the entire product, parentheses Exchange and Server and SQL, how they are covered in Azure as compared to previous certifications. The concern is, you know, Microsoft, it has an appearance almost that they're blocking third-party study guides, which used to be a strong source in the past. Just kind of wondering if we had any comments or thoughts on that. I guess from my perspective, the point of how maybe the new certifications aren't covering the products fully end to end, I think part of that is likely due to the cadence of feature releases in the what I would call kind of the next generation IT. I mean, you think about how fast things move in the cloud. So I mean, you know, a new feature comes out and, you know, the learning resources may not be updated right away because of that. But as far as the third-party study guides go, I mean, I guess personally, I don't see that. I mean, you know, you work for Pluralsight, so I mean, you guys make study resources all day long, so I don't think you're feeling any of that. You know, I'm guessing. I'll let you speak to that point, but just kind of want to see what your thoughts were on that.
You know, on the whole on-prem thing versus the cloud thing, don't get me started on that. But it is challenging that the way the exams are going, they're all focused on Azure. If you know, I worked in Microsoft. I know what the internal talk is that you talk to the people on the server team. Server is not going away. However, the changes that are in server are all hybrid or cloud-based.
Yep.
The big things that are happening are all in the cloud. So at some point, I would guess that they'll have something related to standalone server in a hybrid sort of thing. I would think you would want to have some form of exam for that. The challenge is that, you know, really where the focus now and is the cloud sort of thing. So for the time being, that's kind of where we're left at. So for those customers still on, you know, on-prem Exchange, I don't know whether or not they're going to upload those or where that's going to go. I also haven't seen anything as far as the you know, blocking third-party study guides and anything like that. The only thing that they're very active about is ensuring that people don't publish things that break the NDA of taking the exam.
Yep.
So there's a fine line when you create a study guide of it being a study guide and it being a brain dump.
Brain dump.
So
right.
that's the one thing that sometimes people go over the line and they might get their hands slapped.
Right.
But we haven't seen or heard anything them, you know, preventing, you know, getting that information out there, because they want the people to take the certification exams, because the more people know Azure, the more they buy.
Yep. Makes sense.
Simple. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, you look at the brain dumps versus like the blueprint. I mean, you know, if you're serious about it, the blueprint should be enough to at least know, like, okay, hey, I know this part, I don't know this part, I should go, you know, read up on it. Like you said, I think the example you used was docs. You know, take that particular line item in the blueprint, go put it in the docs, and you'll probably find more information on that than you ever wanted to know, right? So
absolutely. Yep.
Definitely. I think we've got time for one more quick question here. Let's see. I think we covered a lot of the good ones.
I'm going to jump in on let's see. Somebody's found the Microsoft Learning Pass and carrying out sandbox exercises enough to pass the fundamentals at the associate level or any of the areas of the exam not covered. So for the AZ900 exam, this is per Tim Warner. He did excellent. I believe he wrote a book on the AZ900, and I believe he also did a number of sessions in Microsoft Ignite on studying for it. He's one of my coworkers. I know for a fact that the learning path at Microsoft Learn will prepare you completely for the AZ900 exam. Will that, along with the other learnings that you have available, give you all of the hands-on that you need for, say, the AZ-103? I'm not sure. I would use the objectives and the spreadsheet you could probably figure out, in a period of time, which ones you could do within there and which ones you can't. I do know that Microsoft learned that they are looking to try to build out their certifications within Learn. So I believe it is on the roadmap sometime for them to have those in there. So I would say you'd get a good percentage of the hands-on stuff available within those sandbox environments, but then you could supplement it with the Azure account. And as Andy mentioned in one of the answers to a question, there was a typo on that. The free account is good for a year. The 30 days is how long you have the $200 credit, is my understanding. I could be wrong there. I will check that to verify, but I thought the $200 credit was only good for 30 days, but you had the free account for 12 months.
Got it.
Now that I think about that, that could be wrong, but we'll verify that for you and we'll get that information out to you. So I apologize if that's confusing.
That's probably listed in the fine print somewhere on the free sign-up page, I'm sure.
Yeah, the fine print that changes all the time.
That's right. The lawyers love their fine print. So, all right. Well, I think that's all the time we have. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So, first off, Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come talk to us and give us all this great content. So, thank you much. We'll have to have you back at some point.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah, and thanks again to everyone for attending. We hope to see you on another Altero sponsored webinar. And real quick, one last item. Again, if you asked a question that did not get answered, be on the lookout for a follow-up blog post that again contains, a recording, the slide deck, and all of these associated questions and answers. So we want to make sure we get you the answer to your questions. So be on the lookout for that. Other than that, I guess we'll sign off and everybody have a great day. Thank you much.